I'm going to talk about genetic engineering today and what is really possible with genetic engineering. Okay, quick caveat, this is just an idea, this is nothing provable, this is just a fictional idea that I had, or a thought. Okay, I was watching Crow 777 the other day. He started talking about, they had something on agriculture anyway. He was talking about Roundup, okay, and they started getting into Roundup ready crops as well. Okay, so I'm going to start the story. So if you go and look over on Crow's channel, Crow 777, you can probably find this. I can't remember what it was called. I'll try and put it in the description. Roundup. If you don't know what Roundup is, Roundup is a weed killer. Okay, and it became popular in farming because what it did is it replaced a lot of inputs that had to be done with manual labor, with a tractor and some tillage equipment, which took a lot of fuel, equipment wear, and labor to do. Okay, so before you get a field ready to plant, you've got to go in there and you've got to work that field up, plow it or disc it, cultivate it somehow, right? And get it worked up, ready to plant. You don't want any weeds in there when you begin, at least. So you want a clean weed bed. Okay, so what they did is somebody came up with this great idea of Roundup that's basically a weed killer. It kills everything off. You go in, you spray your field, and now you don't have to do all that work, okay, to get your field ready to plant into, right? So it saved a ton of money for farmers. Okay, so once one farmer starts using it, everybody's got to start using it as well to stay competitive. Okay, so Roundup boomed. Okay, now what's a Roundup ready crop? Okay, so if you take a crop like soybeans or, I don't know, corn or whatever, okay, and you insert a gene into that crop that is resistant to the actions of Roundup, okay, you can produce, you've essentially produced a crop that can tolerate being sprayed with Roundup. So if you grow a field of a crop, okay, and you've got weeds that start coming up in the field, you obviously don't want those weeds, because obviously that competes with your crop. Okay, it pulls down your yields, and it's something you've got to go in there and deal with some kind of physical weeding. You have to have some kind of cultivator to go and take out those weeds, or you just leave them in there and you lose yield, and you usually lose quality as well. Tongue twister time. Okay, so if you can go in there and spray those weeds with Roundup and kill them without killing your crop, okay, then you now can improve your yields and improve the money you're making. Okay, you can make more money. Okay, and once one person starts using it, everybody's got to follow suit to stay in business. Okay, now let me tell you something about plant breeding. All the stuff that we've got up to now, at least up until they started genetically modifying things, has been bred by taking and selecting out traits that you want. You take a plant and you breed that with a plant, or breed plants together that have traits that you want. Higher yields, resistant to certain funguses or diseases or pests. Okay, and you breed those plants together, and what you do is you end up with something that's better than you started with. Okay, and this is where we get like dog breeds and stuff like that. Each dog breed was bred for a certain reason. Okay, and they bred those traits out. Okay, and so you end up with a lab, or you end up with a Jack Russell or a Rottweiler or whatever dog you wanted. Okay, that dog has been selected for a certain job. Okay, the same with plants. Okay, and the same with animals as well, with cattle and sheep and all the rest of it. The problem with plant breeding is it takes quite a lot of time to do it, and once that seed's out there, the farmer can go ahead and he can sell that seed, after he's grown a crop. If he wants, he can go ahead and sell that seed. Okay, so what you need is a way to protect your seed that you've bred. Okay, well, you can't do that. You just can't do it. Okay, so I'm sure the people that work for these big companies had a brainstorming idea of how could we protect it. Well, we need to patent it somehow. Well, I know there's this great new thing called genetic engineering. Why don't we just claim that we genetically engineered something and patent it? Seems like a good idea to me. It'll be protected for 20 years. We can license it out to farmers, make them sign a contract, and bingo, we're in the money. And once one's hooked on it, everybody else has got to follow suit. So can you imagine the millions of acres that are grown of these crops and the money that can be made? Okay, guess what? If you're a farmer and you sign up for that thing, if you want to sell seed, you've got to pay them a royalty. Okay, I don't know how it works, to tell you the truth, because I've never got into it. Okay, I know I might live on a farm, but I've never got into it, and it doesn't really interest me anyway. But so I can't really tell you all the ins and outs of it. But this theory I had, now I was thinking to myself, all this genetic engineering, and the guys on Crow were saying, it was quite a hard task to, they had to put this bacteria that was resistant. They had to get the genetics from that into the genetics of a bean plant, and trial and error and all this stuff to get a bean plant that was resistant and everything. I'm thinking the easiest way to get something that's resistant to Roundup, okay, is to go out in the field and just start spraying fields of beans or whatever you're trying to make resistant with a light dose of Roundup. See what survives. Okay, in nature, when you go in and spray a field with Roundup, right, to kill off the weeds out of your targeted, you've got a crop of Roundup ready beans, and you go in and you spray Roundup in there to kill off the weeds, right? What you end up with is you will end up, after 20 or 30 years, you'll end up with some weeds in that field that are resistant to Roundup, that just don't get killed off. Okay, that's nature doing its thing. Okay, now to me, if you had a selective breeding program for your target crop, you went out and planted 10,000, 20,000 acres of beans and went in with a light solution of Roundup, okay, and you sprayed all those beans and you waited to see what survived. This is conventional beans that would normally be killed with Roundup, right? You go in there and you spray them with a light dose of Roundup and you see what survives. Okay, and you might only have a handful of plants out of all that 10,000 acres, right, that survive. You take those plants, you breed from them. Okay, you do the same thing again, except this time you make the Roundup just a little bit stronger. Okay, so instead of a 50% solution, now you're up to, I don't know, 60 or 70% solution. And you do it again, and you get up to an 80, 90% solution. And you do it again, and you take those plants that survive that, and you get it up to 100% tolerance for Roundup. Okay, now all of a sudden you've done a selective breeding program for a Roundup resistant soybean. That's what you've ended up with. But the problem is you've done all this, but you want to protect that thing. So you come up with, the phony lab and you say, oh look, we've created a Roundup ready bean. It's a man-made thing, so we can patent it. Okay, because you can't get this in nature. Hell no, you can't get it in nature. So we're going to patent it, and we'll have the royalties for the next 20 years on it, and nobody else can deal with this stuff, and we'll just get people hooked on it. It'll only take a few years to get the farmer hooked on it. Once the farmer's hooked on it, There's no going back. You can't compete. Once you go down that road, everybody around you starts growing up Roundup Ready stuff. It's going to be a good money maker, okay? And the cost, where I'm at with it, the cost to do it that way has got to be a hell of a lot cheaper than building a lab and all the technology that's got to go into building a lab. It would be so much cheaper. It would be a great idea, being able to patent something that is really not patentable, okay? Something that would happen in nature normally anyway, okay? A selective breeding program, you just cannot patent that. But if you call it genetic engineering and do it that way, all of a sudden you can patent it, okay? Let's think about genetic engineering just for 1 second, okay? Now, we've all seen the clips of them taking the contents out of a cell with a needle, under the microscope, and sucking out the contents and then putting something else back in it. Wonderful. That's not really genetic engineering. That's cell manipulation. Now, when it comes down to actually cutting and splicing genes, and we've got a bacteria that will insert this part of a code into here and this, that, and the other. Okay, we'll believe you on that one, shall we? And this might be real. Genetic engineering might be real. It just seems like a lot of work to get to something that you could have got to by conventional means. Okay, let's think about the size of a genetic code, right? And the idea that you could insert something from another plant or another animal into something else, and it was all just going to function just like you wanted it to. Think about it for a minute. The size of a genetic, the size of a gene, okay? And you're going to put in and change that gene around, and you are going to create something new, something that works just the way you want it to work. It would be a lot quicker to naturally select that thing from a field that's exposed to Roundup, okay? I don't know what else to say. It's like, take a Rolex, right? And you want to build a Rolex, right? Or some other Swiss watch, fine piece of engineering, and all you've got to make it with is a bloody machete or something, right? To me, that's what it would be like. Okay? Cutting out the parts with a damn machete and trying to stick it together and screw it together with a machete. Think about it for a minute. Really think, they're just going to cut and splice this little bit of a gene into this organism, and it's all going to work hunky-dory, just like it should, or just like they want it to work. Or could you just breed something? Could you just breed something that was already that would be, you could probably do it within 10 years. I know the reports are something like 20 to 30 years for fields to have weeds in it that are Roundup ready, right? 20 years. 20 years is not a long time. You can condense that down, because you've got to remember, if you're spraying a field and the weeds are becoming Roundup ready in 20 years, those weeds are not being necessarily picked out and then bred together. Okay, they're still interacting with a lot of other weeds in nature that aren't Roundup ready. That's Roundup resistant. Okay, so that's diluting, if you like, how quickly they can become resistant. Okay, and the other thing that's diluting that as well is the fact that that field's going to end up getting tilled in between times. The field's not going to be, well, there might be a non-till field here and there, but most farmers will do some kind of tillage at some point to that field. Okay, so that weed is basically having to deal with a lot of other pressures. Okay, now if you could take the thing that's showing a little bit of resistance to begin with, and you just took it and started breeding it, and you work directly on it. 10 years maybe to breed something, I don't know. 10, 15 years, however long. In the meantime, you say we're trying to genetically modify this, that, blah blah blah, and 10, 15 years rolls around and you've got something that's resistant. Okay, I know there's other crops out there like corn where they've put BT into, and that it maybe doesn't, the idea doesn't maybe fit into that, but you know what really is, BT is just producing a certain toxin in that plant, and the idea that there are plants that would be able to do that in nature is not far-fetched. You've just got to find the plant out of the millions of acres that are planted and just breed from it. I don't know. When you've got those kind of resources, you know, a lot of these breeds that we have now were not bred by big corporations. They were just bred by like little local farmers, really, or you know, just a group of people, and then they were improved upon by, you know, maybe a bigger group of people that had an association. So that what I'm saying is there really wasn't a huge amount of resources in order to just push something. Okay, it makes you stop and wonder, doesn't it, whether this genetic stuff is really what they say it is. Okay, I mean, when you look at other technologies, I mean, to go from finding out about genes to being able to manipulate them to a point where you can have other genes in another species that quickly, really, does it make logical sense? I mean, look at the bloody motor car. I mean, that's been around for how many years? We were at a parade, what, a year ago, something like that, and I said to my brother-in-law, see that car there from the 50s? I said you could still get around in that thing now comfortably today. You know, the gas mileage is not going to be great, but you can. It'll still be a comfortable car in this day and age. Has the motor vehicle really progressed that much? Yes, there's some great stuff that's going on with it, but it doesn't. You know, it's still just an A to B transportation machine. Okay, that has not really improved that much in all the years and all the technology that's been pumped into it. The same with computers. I mean, I had a computer in the mid-90s. Yeah, I did. And that thing was on, I think, Windows 95. I can't even remember what it's called now. But that thing, I mean, was really, I mean, compared with the computer I'm on right now and computers we've had in the last few years, pretty quick. Really pretty quick. You know, from what I recall, I wouldn't have a problem using that now. Okay. So as things really progressed at the rate, you know, I mean, there's been some great innovations, don't get me wrong, you know, and things have progressed. But what I'm saying is, does it make logical sense that we went from finding out about sort of the basics of genetics and then being able to manipulate something to that level and come up with something that really worked fairly quickly, I would say. I don't know how many years they tried to make a Roundup Ready soybean or whatever, but it makes you wonder, doesn't it? It does make you wonder. In my eyes, the easiest way of going about it would be to do it the natural way and actually grow a crop and actually spray it with Roundup and see what survived and breed that out. Anyway, that's just a theory, isn't it? Okay, that's a theory for everybody to ponder. Anyway, that's got to be it. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll catch you on the next video. Cheers, bye.